Marcus first, then Devin. And honestly, I don't even feel bad about it.
The champagne glass was still wet in her hand when she said it. Last night was insane. I can't believe I actually went through with it. Both of them? In one night? Jessica laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a guilty laugh, the kind of laugh you let out when you think no one important is listening. Marcus first, then Devin. And honestly, I don't even feel bad about it. Tomorrow I marry the safest man in Miami and none of this ever happened. But Caleb Mercer was standing on the other side of that door, and he heard every word. What happened next at that $400,000 wedding on Fisher Island became the most talked-about event in Miami for the next 5 years. 400 guests, a custom Monique Lhuillier gown, a 17-piece orchestra flown in from New York, $30,000 in white orchids hanging from crystal chandeliers in the Grand Pavilion of the Palacio del Mar, the most exclusive event venue south of Palm Beach. It was supposed to be the wedding of the year. And it was. Just not in the way anyone expected. Let me take you back 24 hours before that moment. Because to understand what Caleb did, you need to understand who Caleb was. And more importantly, who Jessica pretended to be. Caleb Mercer was not the kind of man who demanded attention when he walked into a room. He was 6'1", lean, with the quiet posture of someone who spent his days bent over drafting tables and architectural blueprints. His brown hair was always slightly too long, falling across his forehead in a way his mother constantly told him to fix. His jaw was strong but not sharp. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, the kind of eyes that watched everything and said very little. He grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Hialeah. His father, Eduardo Mercer, was a Cuban-American carpenter who built cabinets for other people's kitchens. His mother, Grace, was a school librarian. They never had much, but they had enough. Eduardo taught Caleb to work with his hands. Grace taught him to work with his mind. Between the two of them, they raised a son who could design a building from the foundation up and wasn't afraid to get dust on his knuckles doing it. Caleb put himself through the University of Miami on a partial scholarship and 2 part-time jobs. He graduated top of his class in architecture. He didn't go to a big firm. He didn't chase glass towers in Manhattan or Dubai. Instead, he came home to Miami and started Mercer Design, a small studio that specialized in affordable housing and community spaces. He designed community centers for neighborhoods that couldn't afford architects. He redesigned public libraries on tight city budgets. He turned abandoned lots in Little Havana into pocket parks with benches his father helped build. He was making a difference, but he wasn't making a fortune. By 32, Caleb Mercer had a respected name in Miami's architectural community, a modest condo in Coral Gables he'd renovated himself, a 10-year-old truck he refused to replace because it still ran fine, and absolutely no idea that the woman he'd been dating for 2 years was using him as a stepping stone. Jessica Alderman was everything Caleb was not. Loud where he was quiet, polished where he was rough-edged. Ambitious in a way that had nothing to do with passion and everything to do with positioning. She was 29, 5'7", honey brown skin, thick dark hair that always looked like she'd just stepped out of a salon, brown eyes framed by lashes that cost her $160 every 2 weeks. She had the kind of face that could shift from warm and inviting to ice-cold in the space between sentences. She used both versions strategically. Jessica worked as a junior account manager at a mid-tier marketing firm in Brickell. The pay was decent, the title was not impressive, the ceiling was low, and Jessica Alderman did not do low ceilings. She'd grown up in a middle-class family in Pembroke Pines. Her father managed a rental car franchise. Her mother sold real estate. They were comfortable but not wealthy. And Jessica had decided somewhere around age 19 that comfortable was a prison she intended to escape. When she met Caleb at an art gallery opening in Wynwood, she saw exactly what she needed: a man with a growing reputation, a man whose name was starting to appear in architectural magazines and city council meetings. A man who was clearly on the way up. A man who was too humble to notice when someone was calculating his trajectory. She played the long game. She was patient, attentive, supportive. She learned the names of his projects. She asked about load-bearing walls and zoning permits like she actually cared. She charmed his parents. She brought arroz con pollo to his mother's house and helped Eduardo sand a cabinet in the garage. Caleb fell in love the way quiet men do, slowly, deeply, completely. And he proposed after 18 months with a ring he designed himself. A simple band with a small diamond set flush into the metal so it wouldn't catch on anything. It was elegant, thoughtful, and nothing like the 3-carat princess cut Jessica had pinned on her secret Pinterest board. She said yes with tears in her eyes. The tears were real, but they weren't tears of love. They were tears of relief. Phase 1 was complete, but Caleb didn't know about Phase 2. He didn't know about Marcus Webb, Jessica's ex-boyfriend from college, a personal injury attorney in Coral Gables who drove a white BMW and wore watches that cost more than Caleb's truck. Marcus and Jessica had never fully ended things. They'd just gone underground. He didn't know about Devin Price, and a real estate developer Jessica had met at a networking event 6 months into her relationship with Caleb. Devin was 41, divorced, rich, and exactly the kind of man Jessica actually wanted to marry. But Devin wasn't the marrying type. He'd made that clear. So Jessica kept him as a backup plan and kept Caleb as her public future. 2 men on the side, both continuing while she planned a wedding with a man who trusted her completely. But what Jessica didn't know was that the night before the wedding, her entire carefully constructed world was about to collapse. And the quiet architect from Hialeah was about to show 400 people exactly who she really was. The rehearsal dinner was held at Zuma, the upscale Japanese restaurant in the Miami Epic Hotel. 80 people, close family and the wedding party. And the private dining room overlooked Biscayne Bay, the water reflecting the lights of the city like scattered diamonds. Caleb sat at the head of the table beside Jessica, his hand resting on hers, watching his 2 worlds collide. His parents, Eduardo in a borrowed sport coat and Grace in her best dress, sat across from Jessica's parents, Bob and Linda Alderman, who were 3 glasses of wine deep and telling stories about Jessica's childhood beauty pageants. Caleb's best man, Noah Park, sat to his left. Noah was a structural engineer Caleb had known since their first week at Korean American, stocky, practical, with a dry wit and a bullshit detector that had been finely calibrated over 33 years of life. Noah had never fully warmed to Jessica. He'd never said it directly, but Caleb knew. "You doing okay?" Noah whispered. "You look like you're solving a structural problem in your head." "I'm fine. Just taking it all in." "It's a lot to take in. That ice sculpture alone probably cost more than my first car." Caleb smiled. The ice sculpture had been Jessica's idea. So had the rehearsal dinner at Zuma. So had the 400-person guest list. So had the venue at the Palacio del Mar, which cost $80,000 just to book. The total wedding budget had ballooned to $400,000. Jessica's parents had contributed $100,000. Caleb's parents had given what they could, $30,000 they'd been saving for years. Caleb had taken the rest from his business savings, money he'd been setting aside to expand Mercer Design into a proper firm with employees. He didn't mind. You only get married once. That's what he told himself every time he signed another check. You only get married once. The rehearsal dinner ended at 11. Jessica kissed him at the elevator, her lips tasting like champagne and lip gloss. "I can't believe tomorrow's the day. Are you nervous?" "Not even a little." "Good, because tomorrow is going to be perfect. I promise." She went up to the bridal suite on the 14th floor with her bridesmaids. Caleb went to his room on the 12th floor with Noah and 2 groomsmen. He should have slept. He tried. But his mind was doing what it always did before a big moment, running calculations, checking structures, looking for flaws. At 1:15 in the morning, he gave up on sleep. He pulled on jeans and a t-shirt and took the elevator down to the lobby, thinking he'd walk along the bay and clear his head. Yeah, the lobby was quiet, a few hotel staff, a couple checking in late. He walked past the concierge desk toward the side exit that led to the waterfront terrace. That's when he heard her voice, not from the lobby, from the small cocktail lounge just off the main corridor. The lounge was technically closed, but the hotel had left it open for wedding guests who wanted a nightcap. The lights were dimmed. The door was propped open. Caleb stopped. He recognized two voices, Jessica and Vanessa Torres, her maid of honor. Vanessa was Jessica's closest friend, a cosmetic sales rep who matched Jessica's energy perfectly, loud, strategic, always calculating. Caleb didn't mean to eavesdrop. He was about to call out to let them know he was there. Then he heard something that nailed his feet to the floor. So what happened with Devin last night? Caleb's hand froze halfway to the door frame. What do you think happened? He called me after the bachelorette party, said he wanted to say goodbye properly before I became a married woman. And you went? I went. I drove to his penthouse in Edgewater. We had wine on his terrace. Then we had goodbye in his bedroom, twice. Vanessa laughed, a conspiratorial laugh, a laugh between women who shared secrets like currency. Okay, but what about Marcus? You said you saw him too. I did. Before Devin, Marcus took me to dinner at that Italian place in the Gables, the one with the private booths. Jessica Alderman, the night before your wedding. Last night was insane. I can't believe I actually went through with it. Both of them? In one night? Jessica laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a guilty laugh. The kind of laugh you let out when you think no one important is listening. Marcus first, then Devin. And honestly, I don't even feel bad about it. Tomorrow I marry the safest man in Miami and none of this ever happened. The safest man in Miami? That's what you're going with? Caleb is sweet. He's stable. He's building something. In 5 years, Mercer Design will be worth real money. He just got that federal contract for the Overtown project. That's $7 million in revenue over 3 years. By the time he's 40, he'll be one of the top architects in South Florida. And you'll be the wife who helped build it. Exactly. I'll be the name on the other side of the business card. The face at the galas. The one who networks while he draws his little blueprints. More laughter. Nee, but what about Marcus and Devin? You can't keep seeing them after you're married. There was a pause. A long one. Caleb could hear ice clinking in a glass. I'll figure it out. Marcus is easy. He doesn't want commitment. He just wants access. Devin is trickier. He's catching feelings, which is annoying. But I'll manage it. I've been managing 3 men for over a year. Marriage isn't going to change that. What if Caleb finds out? Another pause. He won't. Caleb doesn't look for things he doesn't want to find. That's the beauty of a good man. They trust you so completely that the idea of checking never even crosses their mind. I could leave my phone unlocked on the table and he'd hand it back to me without looking at it. That's why I picked him. You picked well, girl. I know. Now let's finish these drinks and get some sleep. I have a wedding to star in tomorrow. Caleb stood in the hallway, perfectly still, his back against the wall, his eyes fixed on a spot on the carpet he would remember for the rest of his life. A small stain near the baseboard, shaped like a comma. He stared at it because if he looked at anything else, if he moved, if he breathed too loudly, the 2 women 15 feet away would know he was there. He waited until he heard them leave through the lounge's other exit. Then he walked to the waterfront terrace, sat on a bench facing Biscayne Bay, and stared at the water for a very long time. He didn't cry. He didn't punch a wall. He didn't call Noah. He sat with it. He let it wash through him like a tide through a foundation, testing every joint, every connection, every load-bearing wall he'd built his future on. And one by one, he felt them fail. But here's the thing about architects. They don't panic when structures fail. They assess, They calculate, they redesign. And Caleb Mercer, the quiet kid from Hialeah who built community centers for neighborhoods that couldn't afford them, sat on that bench until 3 in the morning, designing something new. Not a building, a plan. By the time the sun came up over Biscayne Bay, Caleb Mercer knew exactly what he was going to do. And Jessica Alderman had no idea that the safest man in Miami was about to become the most dangerous person at her wedding. Caleb was back in his hotel room by 3:30. He didn't sleep. He sat at the small desk by the window and did what he did best. He planned. At 6 in the morning, he called Noah. "It's 6 a.m. on your wedding day. Why are you calling me?" "I need you to come to my room, now, and bring your laptop." Something in Caleb's voice made Noah skip the jokes. He was there in 7 minutes, rumpled and concerned, his laptop under his arm. Caleb told him everything, every word he'd heard, every detail. Noah listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. When Caleb finished, Noah was quiet for a long moment. "We cancel, right now. I'll handle the calls. You don't have to face any of—" "No." "Caleb, $400,000, Noah. 30,000 of that came from my parents' savings. My dad has been working double shifts for 2 years to help pay for this wedding. If I cancel now, that money's gone. The deposits, the vendors, the venue. Gone. So what? Money is money. My dignity is exactly what I'm protecting. If I cancel—" Jessica spins a story. She tells everyone I got cold feet. She plays the victim. My parents are humiliated. Her parents blame me. And Jessica Alderman walks away clean, ready to do this to the next guy. Noah studied his friend's face. He'd known Caleb for 15 years. He'd seen him calm under every kind of pressure. Tight deadlines, difficult clients, building inspections that could make or break a project. But this was different. This wasn't calm. This was controlled fury. "What do you want to do?" "I want to walk down that aisle. I want to stand at that altar. And I want every single person in that room to see exactly who Jessica Alderman really is. Not because I told them, because she showed them." He pulled out his phone. "Last night, when I got back to my room, I remembered something. 3 months ago, Jessica borrowed my laptop to order new curtains for our apartment. She logged into her iCloud and forgot to sign out. I found her account still synced to my Safari this morning. Her messages, all of them. Marcus, Devin, 18 months of conversations. You have the messages? Screenshots, hundreds of them. Dates, times, photos she sent them, photos they sent her. Messages where she talks about me like I'm a business investment. Messages where she discusses my net worth projection with Vanessa like they're analyzing a stock portfolio." Noah leaned back in his chair. "What else?" "I need you to call 2 people for me. First, call my cousin Elena at the front desk downstairs. She helped us book this venue. Tell her I need access to the AV system in the Grand Pavilion. Tell her I have a surprise video montage for the reception. She'll set it up, no questions asked." "And the second person?" "David Reeves, my attorney." "Your business attorney? Why?" "Because Jessica signed a prenup 4 months ago. She fought me on it for weeks, said it was insulting, said it meant I didn't trust her. She told her friends I was being controlling. She told her mother I was cheap. But I held firm. My business attorney drafted it, and Jessica's lawyer reviewed and signed off. And Section 9, Morality Clause. If either party is found to have engaged in infidelity or deception prior to or during the marriage, the offending party forfeits all claims to shared assets, spousal support, and any financial interest in the other party's business or property. The clause was David's idea. I thought it was overkill at the time. It wasn't overkill. No, it wasn't. Noah made both calls within the hour. Elena confirmed AV access. David Reeves answered on the second ring and, after hearing a 60-second summary, said 4 words. "Don't change anything, I'm coming." By 9 that morning, the plan was in motion. And Jessica Alderman was upstairs in the bridal suite, sipping mimosas with her bridesmaids, completely unaware that the quiet architect she'd underestimated for 2 years was about to redesign her entire life. The grand pavilion of the Palacio del Mar was breathtaking. That was the word everyone used, and for once, it wasn't an exaggeration. The ceiling was 30 feet of curved glass and white steel, designed to let the Miami sky pour in like a painting. $30,000 worth of white orchids cascaded from crystal chandeliers, creating living curtains of petals that swayed in the carefully controlled breeze from hidden ventilation. 400 gilded chairs lined a center aisle covered in white silk. The 17-piece orchestra was positioned on a raised platform to the left of the altar, their instruments gleaming under soft lighting designed by a team that usually worked South Beach fashion shows. The altar itself was a custom structure Caleb had designed, an arch of reclaimed driftwood and white steel, modern and organic, elegant without being ostentatious. He'd spent 3 weekends building it by hand. Jessica had wanted a flower arch from a catalog. Caleb had quietly insisted. "This is what I do. Let me build something beautiful for us." She'd relented. She liked telling people her fiancé had built the wedding arch himself. It was a good story, a good branding. Caleb stood at the altar now, flanked by Noah and 3 other groomsmen. He was wearing a slim-fitted navy blue suit with a white shirt, no tie. He'd gotten a haircut that morning at the hotel barbershop. His jaw was clean-shaven. His shoes were polished. He looked, according to multiple guests who would later recount this day in detail, absolutely calm. No one knew he hadn't slept. No one knew about the USB drive in his jacket pocket. No one knew that the AV system had been loaded and tested during the cocktail hour setup. No one knew except Noah, who stood 2 feet to his left, his hands clasped, his expression carefully neutral, his heart hammering against his ribs. "You good?" Noah barely whispered. "I'm good. You don't have to do this. We can still walk." "I know. I'm not walking." The orchestra began. "Por Pachelbel's Canon." The doors at the far end of the pavilion opened, and there she was. Jessica Alderman on her father's arm, a vision in white. The gown was custom Monique L'Huillier, $62,000, hand-embroidered French lace over Italian silk organza. A sweetheart neckline that framed her collarbones, a fitted bodice that flared at the hip into a cathedral train requiring 3 attendants. She'd had 4 fittings in New York and 2 more in Miami. The result was a gown that moved like water and caught the light like something alive. Her makeup was flawless. Dewy skin, soft, smoky eyes, nude lips with just enough gloss to catch the chandeliers. Her dark hair was pulled back in a low chignon with loose tendrils framing her face. Diamond earrings caught the light. Her bouquet was a cascading arrangement of white orchids and stephanotis that cost $4,000 and would be dead by tomorrow. She was stunning. There was no denying that. Every head in the room turned. Women sighed. Men straightened their ties. Cameras clicked and flashed. She walked slowly, savoring every step, every flash, every admiring glance. This was her moment, the one she'd been engineering for 2 years, the payoff, the closing ceremony of the longest con she'd ever run. When she reached the altar, her father, Bob, placed her hand in Caleb's. Bob's eyes were misty. He patted Caleb's shoulder. "Take care of my girl." "I will." Bob stepped back. Jessica looked up at Caleb with wide brown eyes full of practiced adoration. "You look amazing." "So do you. You really do." His voice was steady. His eyes were warm. If you were watching from the 4th row, you'd see a man deeply in love. If you were Noah Park, standing close enough to see the muscle tightening in Caleb's jaw, you'd see something else entirely. The officiant began. The vows were exchanged. When it was Jessica's turn, she delivered her lines with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed them in front of a mirror 17 times, because she had. "Caleb, From the first moment I saw your work, I knew you were different. You build things that matter. You create beauty from nothing. And every day with you, I feel like I'm living inside something you designed. Something safe, something strong, something permanent." The guests melted. Jessica's mother wiped tears with a silk handkerchief. Eduardo Mercer squeezed Grace's hand. Caleb nodded. Then he delivered his vows. "Jessica, when I design a building, the first thing I look for is the foundation. Because without a strong foundation, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter how beautiful the facade is. It doesn't matter how expensive the materials are. If the foundation is flawed, the whole structure fails." He paused, just long enough for something to shift in the room, just long enough for Noah to hold his breath. "I believed we had a strong foundation. I believed what we built together was real. And I want you to know that everything I've done with honesty, with integrity, and with the belief that you deserved the best version of me." He squeezed her hands. "I hope you can say the same." Jessica's smile wavered for half a second, just a flicker. Then it was back, bright and confident. She hadn't heard the edge, or if she had, she'd filed it under nervous groom, says something slightly weird. No threat detected. The officiant asked for the rings. The rings were exchanged. The officiant smiled. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Caleb kissed her, softly, briefly. Not the triumphant dip and kiss most grooms go for, just a quiet press of lips that Jessica didn't even notice was a goodbye. 400 guests applauded. Orchid petals fell from hidden releases in the ceiling. The orchestra swelled. Jessica beamed victorious, and Caleb Mercer walked back down the aisle with his arm around the woman who had betrayed him, his face calm, his plan locked, and a USB drive pressing against his chest like a second heartbeat. The reception space was a separate wing of the Palacio del Mar. They're connected to the ceremony pavilion by a garden walkway lined with luminarias and hanging lanterns. The cocktail hour had been set up on the terrace overlooking the marina, where a raw bar, 3 specialty cocktail stations, and a sushi chef kept 400 guests entertained while the pavilion was flipped for dinner. Inside, the reception hall was transforming. Round tables draped in ivory linen, centerpieces of white orchids and floating candles in crystal bowls, a custom dance floor with the couple's initials etched in gold, a 12-tier wedding cake that looked more like an architectural model than a dessert, which was appropriate, given the groom. Caleb moved through the cocktail hour like a ghost. He shook hands. He accepted congratulations. He posed for photos with Jessica, his arm around her waist, his smile locked in place. And he was operating on a frequency no one around him could detect. Noah stayed close. Not obviously. Just nearby. Available. "Elena confirmed the AV system is loaded," Noah said during a quiet moment near the raw bar. "Screen drops from the ceiling at the front of the reception hall. She thinks it's a surprise photo montage." "Good. David Reeves is here. Table 19, back corner. He's got the prenup, the screenshots, and a notarized affidavit ready for your signature." "Good. Caleb, brother, last chance. We can still handle this privately. After the reception. No audience." Caleb looked at his best man. For the first time all day, something raw flickered behind his dark eyes. Pain. Genuine pain. The kind that comes from loving someone who never existed. "She said I was the safest man in Miami. She said she picked me because I'd never check. She said she's been managing 3 men for over a year, and marriage wasn't going to change that. She's not going to stop, Noah. And if I do this quietly, she controls the narrative. She tells everyone we had differences. She plays the victim. And in 6 months, she's doing this to someone else." He straightened his jacket. "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this because 400 people are in that room believing a lie. My parents are in that room believing a lie. And I'm not going to let a single one of them leave tonight without knowing the truth." Noah nodded slowly. Then he did what best men do. He stood beside his friend and prepared for what came next. Dinner was served. 4 courses: sea bass crudo, butternut squash bisque, filet mignon with truffle butter, and a pear tart that nobody would remember eating. Because by the time dessert was served, no one was thinking about food. The toasts began. Vanessa Torres went first, the maid of honor. She stood in her burgundy bridesmaid dress, champagne in hand, and delivered a speech about friendship, destiny, and how Jessica had always known exactly what she wanted. Jessica doesn't settle. She never has. She knew from the moment she met Caleb that he was the one. Not because he was perfect, but because he was real, because he was honest, because he was the kind of man who builds things that last. The irony was so thick, Caleb could taste it. He smiled. Vanessa didn't notice the smile didn't reach his eyes. To Jessica and Caleb, may your foundation be as strong as the buildings he designs. Everyone drank, and Jessica squeezed Caleb's hand under the table. He squeezed back. Noah stood next. He'd prepared a speech. He'd been working on it for 3 weeks. Funny stories from college, observations about Caleb's obsessive attention to detail, a heartfelt tribute to a friendship that had lasted half their lives. He threw it all away. I've known Caleb Mercer since we were 18 years old. He's the most honest person I've ever met. Not honest in the way people say when they mean polite. Honest in the way that costs something. He tells you the truth even when it's hard. He keeps his promises even when it's expensive. And he never, ever pretends to be something he's not. He paused, looked at Caleb. Caleb, you deserve exactly what you're about to get. Double meaning. Only 2 people in the room caught it. To the truth. He raised his glass. To everyone drank. Jessica laughed and leaned into Caleb. That was sweet. He really loves you? Yes, he does. The wedding coordinator approached the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the groom has prepared a special surprise for his bride. Caleb? Jessica's face lit up. A surprise. She loved surprises, especially public ones. She turned to Caleb with sparkling eyes. You didn't tell me about this. That's kind of the point of a surprise. He kissed her forehead. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the front of the reception hall, where a microphone stand waited beside a small podium. What happened next took exactly 14 minutes, and it changed every single life in that room. Now, before I tell you exactly what Caleb said into that microphone, I need you to do something. If you've been watching this far, if you're invested in this story, if you believe that the truth always finds a way out, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, just take 2 seconds and tap it. And smash that like button, because it genuinely helps this channel grow and reach more people who need to hear stories like this. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next, because what Caleb Mercer did with that microphone and that screen is the most devastating, calculated, brilliant act of justice I've ever told on this channel. Now let's get back to the reception. Caleb stood at the podium. 400 faces looked up at him expectantly. Jessica sat at the head table, her chin resting on her hand, smiling the smile of a woman who expected to be adored in public. Caleb cleared his throat. Thank you all for being here tonight, and this has been the most important day of my life. And I mean that in ways I couldn't have imagined 24 hours ago. Polite laughter, a few raised glasses. I want to talk about foundations for a moment. As most of you know, I'm an architect. It's not just what I do, it's how I see the world. Every structure I design starts with the same question. Is the foundation sound? Because if the foundation is compromised, if there are cracks you can't see, if the soil underneath has shifted, then no matter how beautiful the building looks on the outside, it's only a matter of time before the whole thing comes down. The room was quiet, attentive. People assumed this was a metaphor about marriage. It was, just not the way they expected. Last night after our rehearsal dinner, I couldn't sleep. I was too excited, too grateful. So I went for a walk. And during that walk, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. Jessica's smile faded, not all at once. It receded like a tide pulling back from shore, revealing what was underneath. Confusion first, then something sharper. I overheard my bride Jessica talking with her maid of honor, Vanessa, in the hotel lounge. They didn't know I was there. And what I heard was a conversation about two men who are not me, two men Jessica spent the night before our wedding with. The silence hit the room like a shockwave. 400 people stopped breathing at the same time. Jessica stood up. Her face was white. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table. "Caleb, baby, what are you— Please sit down, Jessica. I'm not finished." His voice was not loud. It was not angry. Yet it was the voice of a man presenting findings at a city council meeting. Measured, factual, devastating. The two men are Marcus Webb, a personal injury attorney in Coral Gables, and Devin Price, a real estate developer in Edgewater. Jessica has been seeing both of them for the duration of our relationship, not occasionally, consistently, and she had no intention of stopping after our marriage. Murmurs erupted. Jessica's mother grabbed her husband's arm. Eduardo Mercer's face had turned to stone. "Now, I know this is hard to believe based on words alone, so I want to show you something." He signaled to Elena at the AV booth. The screen descended from the ceiling. The lights dimmed automatically. The first image appeared. A text message thread between Jessica and Marcus, dated 3 weeks before the wedding. Now, Caleb didn't read the messages aloud. He didn't have to. The screen was 60 inches wide and the font was large enough to read from the back row. He let the room read in silence. He scrolled slowly, methodically. Message after message. Messages where Jessica called Caleb her safety net. Messages where she discussed his projected income with the clinical detachment of a financial analyst. Messages where she told Marcus she'd be available every Tuesday and Thursday because those were the nights Caleb worked late at the studio. He scrolled to a second thread. Jessica and Devin. More messages. These were worse, more intimate, more calculated. Devin asking when she was going to leave Caleb. Jessica responding that she wasn't, that Caleb was the long-term investment, Devin was the dividend. The room was in chaos, quiet chaos. The kind where 400 people are all processing the same catastrophe at different speeds. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Some were staring at Jessica. Some were looking at their own spouses with sudden, uncomfortable awareness. Jessica was standing now, her cathedral train pooled around her feet like a fallen flag. "Stop it! Caleb, stop this right now! Those are private! You had no right to—" "I had no right," he turned to face her. For the first time, his voice carried real emotion. Not rage, something quieter, something worse. "You spent the night before our wedding with 2 other men. You've been lying to me for 2 years. You told your best friend that you picked me because I was safe, because I wouldn't check, because I was too trusting to suspect anything." He let those words settle. I had every right. From the back of the room, David Reeves stood. He was wearing a quiet gray suit. He carried a leather folder. He walked to the front with the unhurried pace of a man who had done this in courtrooms 100 times. "My name is David Reeves. I'm Mr. Mercer's attorney. 4 months ago, Mr. Mercer and Ms. Alderman signed a prenuptial agreement. Section 9 of that agreement contains a morality clause stipulating that if either party engaged in infidelity or deception prior to or during the marriage, the offending party forfeits all claims to shared assets, spousal support, and any financial interest in the other party's business or property." He opened his folder. "Based on the evidence Mr. Mercer has provided, including time-stamped messages, location data, and the conversation overheard last night, yet we will be filing for annulment on Monday morning. Ms. Alderman will receive nothing." Jessica was shaking. Vanessa had sunk so low in her chair she was practically under the table. "You can't do this. My lawyer will—" "Your lawyer reviewed and approved the prenup 4 months ago, including Section 9. I'd recommend you call them Monday." Eduardo Mercer stood from his seat. The retired carpenter from Hialeah. The man who'd worked double shifts for 2 years to help pay for this wedding. He didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. He walked to the front of the room and stood beside his son. He looked at Jessica. "I built things my whole life. Cabinets, shelves, tables, things for other people's homes. I never had much, but I had my name, and my son has his name. And you were never going to take that from him." He put his hand on Caleb's shoulder. Grace joined them, her eyes wet, but her posture straight. Caleb took the microphone one final time. "I want everyone in this room to understand something. I didn't do this for revenge. I did this because I spent 2 years building a life with someone who was performing a role, and every person in this room deserves to know the truth. My parents deserve to know the truth. I deserve to know the truth. And Jessica, you deserve the consequences of your choices." He removed his wedding ring. The ring Jessica had picked out, platinum, expensive, nothing like the simple band he'd designed for her. He set it on the podium. "I designed the arch we stood under today. I built it with my own hands. It took me 3 weekends. And right now, it's the only honest thing about this wedding." He stepped away from the podium. He walked past the head table. He didn't look at Jessica. He walked through the reception hall, past 400 stunned faces, past the 12-tier cake, past the custom dance floor with their initials in gold. Noah fell into step beside him. Eduardo and Grace followed. The ballroom doors closed behind them with a sound that every guest would remember. Behind them, the silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then the room erupted. The next 72 hours moved fast. Monday morning, 9 a.m., David Reeves filed annulment papers with the Miami-Dade County Clerk. By Tuesday afternoon, Jessica's attorney had called David's office to say his client would not contest. There was nothing to contest. The prenup was airtight. The evidence was overwhelming. The morality clause was clear. Jessica Alderman, as of Tuesday at 4:17 p.m., was legally single with 0 claims to anything Caleb Mercer had built or would ever build. But the legal outcome was just the beginning. The wedding had been attended by 400 people. Miami people, business people, society people, people who talked. And in Miami, when people talk, the whole city listens. By Monday night, 3 separate guests had posted about the wedding on social media. No names at first. Just enough detail for anyone in Miami's social scene to connect the dots. By Wednesday, a local gossip blog had the full story. By Friday, it had been picked up by 2 national outlets covering it as a viral moment. Jessica's professional life unraveled first. Her firm in Brickell called her in on Wednesday. Her boss, a woman named Patricia Wen, was direct. "Our clients are talking about you, Jessica. 3 accounts have specifically asked that you be removed from their teams. I can't have a public scandal attached to this firm." She was offered a quiet resignation. She took it. By the end of the week, she was unemployed. Marcus Webb, the attorney, had his own reckoning. Several of his clients had been at the wedding. One of them, a woman going through a bitter divorce herself, immediately fired him. His managing partner called a meeting. Marcus wasn't terminated, but he was reassigned to the firm's least desirable cases and removed from client-facing work. His white BMW was repossessed 6 weeks later when he couldn't make the payments without his commission income. Devin Price, the developer, disappeared from Miami's social scene almost overnight. His business partners distanced themselves. 2 pending deals fell through when investors cited concerns about his personal judgment. He relocated to Tampa 3 months later and told people he wanted a fresh start. No one believed him. Vanessa Torres, the maid of honor who had laughed along in that hotel lounge, lost something less tangible but equally devastating. Her social circle evaporated. Every woman in their friend group suddenly remembered a time Vanessa had kept a secret she shouldn't have, had enabled behavior she should have called out, had chosen loyalty to Jessica over basic decency. Vanessa spent 6 months trying to rebuild her reputation. She eventually moved to Orlando and started over. Jessica's parents, Bob and Linda, were devastated. Bob called Caleb 2 weeks after the wedding. I need to talk to you. Okay. What you did at that wedding? The public part? That was hard for me and Linda. I know, I'm sorry about that. A long pause. But I listened to what you said, and I talked to Jessica, and she didn't deny it. Not really. She tried to minimize it, she tried to spin it, but she didn't deny it. Another pause. You're a good man, Caleb. I wish my daughter had been the woman you thought she was. So do I, Bob, so do I. That phone call was the last time they spoke, but Caleb kept it in his memory as proof that truth, even when it's painful, eventually earns respect. Caleb Mercer did what architects do after a demolition. He cleared the site. He surveyed the damage, and then he started building again. The first month was hard. He won't pretend it wasn't. And he went back to work at Mercer Design 3 days after the wedding and threw himself into the Overtown Community Project, the $7 million federal contract that Jessica had been counting on exploiting. He worked 14-hour days. He redesigned the community center's public spaces to include a free co-working area for local entrepreneurs. He added a rooftop garden his mother suggested. He built something that mattered. Noah came over every Friday with takeout and bad action movies. They didn't talk about Jessica. They talked about load calculations and whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie. It was exactly what Caleb needed. His parents checked on him constantly. Eduardo showed up at the studio one Saturday with his tools and spent the afternoon helping Caleb build a new drafting table. You know, when your mother and I were dating, I didn't have a car. I used to take 2 buses to pick her up for dinner. I couldn't afford restaurants, so I'd pack sandwiches and we'd eat in the park. I know this story, Dad. Then you know the ending. 40 years, same woman, same love, because it was real from day one. Not performed, not strategic, just real. He tightened a screw. You'll find that, not because you're looking for it, because you stopped looking for the wrong thing. 6 months after the wedding, Caleb was invited to speak at a design conference in Coconut Grove. The topic was community-centered architecture. He almost didn't go. Public speaking wasn't his thing, but Noah convinced him. You just stood up in front of 400 people and dismantled a con artist with a slideshow. I think you can handle 50 architects and a Q&A. He went. He spoke about the Overtown project, about designing spaces that serve people instead of impressing them, about honesty in architecture, about buildings that tell the truth about what they are. After the talk, a woman approached him. She was about his age, medium height, dark red hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, light brown eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses. She was wearing a blazer over a simple dress, no jewelry except a watch, and she carried a notebook that was so full of sticky notes it looked like it was about to burst. That was a really good talk, especially the part about foundations. I'm guessing that metaphor means more to you than architecture? Caleb studied her, direct, no pretense. It might. I'm Mara Sullivan. I run a nonprofit that builds transitional housing for families coming out of shelters. We're about to break ground on a project in Liberty City, and we need an architect who actually cares about the people who'll live in the building, not just the people who'll photograph it. That sounds like my kind of project. Good. Because our budget is about 1/3 of what you're probably used to, the timeline is aggressive, and the city keeps changing the zoning requirements. It's going to be difficult, underfunded, and incredibly frustrating. She smiled. It was crooked, genuine, nothing like the practiced, photogenic smile he'd spent 2 years looking at across dinner tables. Interested? Absolutely. They met for coffee the next week to discuss the project. The coffee meeting lasted 4 hours. They talked about architecture for the first 40 minutes. Then they talked about everything else. Her parents were high school teachers in Jacksonville. She'd put herself through Florida State on scholarships and ramen noodles. She'd turned down corporate law to work in housing advocacy because, as she put it, someone has to care about where people sleep at night. She drove a Subaru with a dent in the passenger door. She lived in a small apartment in Little Haiti that she'd painted herself, badly, in colors she chose because they made her happy, not because they were trending. She had no social media presence, no strategic networking plan, no hidden agenda. She was exactly what she appeared to be. And for a man who'd spent 2 years loving a performance, that was the most attractive thing in the world. They didn't rush it. Caleb wasn't capable of rushing anything anymore. They worked on the Liberty City project together for 3 months before he asked her to dinner. Actual dinner, not a project meeting. Is this a date? If you want it to be. I want it to be. But I should tell you something first. I know about the wedding. Everyone in Miami's nonprofit community knows. It's kind of legendary. Does that bother you? No. What bothers me is that someone did that to you. And what impresses me is how you handled it. Not the public part, the part after. The part where you went back to work and kept building things that matter instead of becoming bitter and building walls. They went to dinner. It was a small Cuban place in Hialeah, 2 blocks from the apartment Caleb grew up in. The food was incredible. The conversation was better. And he told her about his parents, about Eduardo's sandwiches in the park, about Grace's library. She told him about her students in the transitional housing program, about the 6-year-old who asked if the new building would have windows in every room because she'd never had a bedroom with a window. When he drove her home, she turned to him at the door. Caleb, I need you to know something. I don't have a strategic plan for this. I don't have a timeline or an agenda. I just like you. That's it. That's the whole thing. He looked at her. This woman with the sticky note notebook and the dented Subaru and the crooked smile. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something he'd forgotten was possible. Trust. Not the blind trust Jessica had exploited. Not the naive trust of a man who doesn't look for what he doesn't want to find. Real trust. The kind you build slowly, deliberately, like a structure designed to last. That's enough. That's more than enough. 14 months after the wedding that wasn't, Caleb Mercer and Mara Sullivan stood in the courtyard of the Liberty City transitional housing complex they'd built together. 24 units, every one of them occupied, every one of them with windows in every room. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was small, city officials, community leaders, a few journalists, the families who would live there. No 400-person guest list, no imported orchids, no 12-tier cake. Mara stood beside him, her red hair loose for once, her eyes bright behind those tortoiseshell glasses. She was wearing a sundress and work boots because they'd been doing final touch-ups on the community garden that morning. Mr. Mercer, this project has received national attention, the reporter said. The design has been called revolutionary for affordable housing. How does it feel to see it completed? It feels like the best thing I've ever built. He looked at Mara. She smiled. That crooked, real, unrehearsed smile. Later that evening, at a small dinner with Noah, Eduardo, Grace, and Mara, Eduardo stood and raised a glass of Cuban coffee because he'd never been a wine person. To my son, who learned the hardest lesson a man can learn and used it to build something even better. And to Mara, Grace added, who was smart enough to see what Jessica was too foolish to appreciate. Mara blushed. Caleb squeezed her hand under the table. Later, walking along the water in Hialeah, just the two of them, Mara stopped and turned to him. Can I ask you something? Do you regret it? The wedding. Going through with it. The whole public thing. Caleb thought about it. Really thought about it. The way he thought about any structural question. From every angle. I regret loving someone who wasn't real. I regret the money my parents spent. I regret the 18 months I lost building a future with someone who was building an exit strategy. But the rest? The part where I stood up in front of 400 people and told the truth? He shook his head. I don't regret that. Because Jessica would have done it again. To someone else. Someone who maybe wouldn't have found out in time. Someone who might have lost everything before they realized the foundation was cracked. He looked out at the water. I'm an architect. When I find a structural flaw, I don't cover it up with a nice coat of paint. I expose it. I fix it. Or I tear the whole thing down and start over. He turned back to Mara. Sometimes tearing it down is the only way to build something better. She took his hand. Then let's build something better. He smiled. A real smile. The first one in a long time that carried no weight behind it. Deal. 6 months later, Caleb proposed to Mara on the rooftop garden of the Liberty City housing complex, the one his mother had suggested. The ring was simple, a band he'd designed himself. No diamond, just a strip of reclaimed copper from the first beam they'd installed on the project, set into brushed silver. Mara said yes before he finished asking. The wedding was nothing like the first one. 30 people, the courtyard of the housing complex. Eduardo built the arch. Grace arranged wildflowers from the rooftop garden. Noah was the best man again, and this time his speech was 3 sentences long. I've been Caleb's best man twice now. The first time, I stood beside him while he exposed a lie. This time, I'm standing beside him while he celebrates the truth. And honestly, this version is a lot less stressful. Everyone laughed. Caleb laughed hardest. When Caleb said his vows, he didn't talk about foundations. He talked about windows. Mara, a little girl once asked you if her new home would have windows in every room. You made sure it did, because you understood that everyone deserves to see the light. You gave me that too. After 2 years of living in a building with no windows, you showed me the light again. And I'm never closing the curtains, Mara cried. Real tears, the good kind, the kind that come from being seen completely and loved anyway. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed her the way he should have been kissed the first time, fully, honestly, with nothing held back and nothing hidden. Eduardo leaned over to Grace. That, right there, that's what it's supposed to look like. I know, mi amor, I know. So here's what I want you to take from this story. Jessica Alderman saw a quiet man and assumed quiet meant unaware. She saw kindness and called it weakness. She saw trust and called it stupidity. She thought the safest man in Miami was the easiest man to fool. She was wrong. Because the thing about quiet people is that they're always watching. They're always listening. They're always building something in their mind that you can't see until it's too late. And the thing about good men, real good men, the ones who work with their hands and love with their whole hearts, is that when you betray them, they don't scream. They don't beg. They don't bargain. They build a case. And then they build a new life. Jessica thought she could manage 3 men like a stock portfolio. She thought trust was a vulnerability to exploit. She thought the wedding was the finish line. It wasn't. It was the starting gun. And Caleb Mercer ran a race she never saw coming. So, viewers, what do you think? Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was living a double life? Have you ever been underestimated by someone who confused your kindness for weakness? Have you ever had to tear something down to build something better? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit you somewhere real, if it reminded you that the truth is always worth telling, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people, share this video. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Because here's the truth. Not everyone who smiles at you loves you. Not everyone who says forever means it. And not every building that looks beautiful on the outside has a foundation worth standing on. But when you find the real thing, the honest thing, the love that doesn't need a $400,000 stage to perform on, hold on to it, build on it, and never let anyone tell you that what you have isn't enough. because enough built on truth will outlast every mansion built on lies. Until next time.